The following is a conversation with Peter Welinder, VP of Product and Partnerships at OpenAI. OpenAI is an AI research and deployment company with a mission to ensure that artificial general intelligence benefits all of humanity. OpenAI's API provides access to GPT-3, which performs a wide variety of natural language tasks, and Codex, which translates natural language to code. Peter was part of the team developing OpenAI API since its inception. He tells the story of bold experimentation, rapid iteration, and leveraging smart design to achieve economies of scale. If you're interested in GPT-3, make sure to subscribe and check out our GPT-3 manual book by O'Reilly. This is Sandra and Shubham, and we hope you enjoy this interview.
So starting off, Peter, as you know, GPT-3, one of the biggest language model of all times. How did you came up with the idea to offer access to a language model as big as GPT-3 in the form of an API? Was it already in plans for quite some time, and was it in development? It will be really great if you can walk us through some behind the scenes things of how the API thing occurred, and how did you decided to release GPT-3 in the form of an API?
Yeah, sure, super. That's a great question. I think it all comes kind of back to the mission of OpenAI. And I don't know if you read our mission or our charter, but you can summarize our mission in three things. Basically, it's like develop AGI, artificial general intelligence, make sure it's kind of safe, and then lastly, kind of deploy it into the world to kind of make it maximize the benefit to all of humanity. And so we kind of always knew that eventually, as the technology that we develop gets more and more general, we want to find ways to get it out into the world. And I think for a lot of different things that we had been working on at OpenAI in the past, there wasn't necessarily a super clear path to kind of when it would, how it would actually be useful. It was more kind of research bets towards what are some ingredients or what are some things we need to get to AGI. Like, for example, we created this Dota bot that beat the world champions on Dota 2. But I don't think there's a huge market for Dota bots and so on. And it wasn't really clear, how you use that to kind of benefit humanity. But it was really important as a research breakthrough to kind of get us closer to understand how to get to AGI. Similarly, I think our work on say solving Rubik's Cube with a robotic hand was also kind of really to push a particular piece of technology really, really far as a research project. It wasn't necessarily kind of develop something that was useful, because I think general purpose robotics is still a few years off, but it was like to really understand like some of the key ingredients for getting to kind of more general intelligence. And similarly, we had a bet on language models to kind of see how far can you push language models, like trained in an unsupervised way, and see like can they carry out more and more general tasks, and how can you use them, and how can you scale that up. And I think with GPT-3, when we got that was the first time where we had something that kind of we felt like actually this seems to be fairly useful. Like it's getting state-of-the-art results on a number of tasks in like academic kind of benchmarks and so on. But a lot of those academic benchmarks are sort of related to things that could actually be useful, like translation benchmarks, or a lot of these almost kind of reasoning benchmarks and so on that come out of the natural language community. So for us, it was really we kind of debated a lot of ways we could kind of use this. Like we could create like a really good translation service. So like we had found that it was really useful for doing writing assistance. Like maybe we can create this amazing writing assistant, or like imagine it being deployed in lots of like customer service applications. What if, like, you all know how annoying it can be to wait for a customer service representative, and like there's all like the quality between them vary a lot and so on. But maybe we can use this technology to kind of develop a much better kind of customer service. But the thing is, like, it was really hard to pick, and at some point we were like, why we can only pick one of these things, because like we're a small company and it's unclear which one is like the most like has the best outcome in some sense. And why not instead just provide this technology as an API, and we let any developer kind of build their own business on top, where the way to really kind of maximize the impact of this technology is to have millions of developers building on it for the problems that they see in their lives, in their experiences that we have no idea about. That way we can just like maximize the impact of this technology. And we also knew, as part of our research, like the technology we develop, we just get better and better models, more and more general models, and like there's just going to be more and more things you can apply these. So like this problem of picking a specific application will just get worse in some sense, and that's a good thing, right? Like, so it's really about for us, it was a big kind of strategic thing around like, let's just, instead of us building these applications, let's focus on what we're really good at, which is creating the really, really amazing models. And then let's push the actual product development that you can build on top of these to all these developers that are going to be much better than us at building solutions for all the problems around them. So that's kind of how we thought about it.
That's a great way of thinking about it, and I love your like philosophy of being as open and as general in sharing this technology as possible. So I was wondering, I think you did something groundbreaking in a way that you shared this fresh, cutting-edge research into the world via API. And I'm wondering how, like, what the process looked like. Was it challenging for you to do so? Is it challenging to share this like huge language model, sophisticated language model with the public? And in that case, like, what kind of challenges are there?
Yeah, no, definitely it was. I felt like as we were doing that, we were like entering kind of uncharted territory in some sense, because I think a lot of the work on large language models before then had really focused much more on training the models, like really kind of scalable, efficient systems for like, squeezing the maximum the maximum efficiency out of the GPUs for training. But nobody had really focused on the inference side of actually like, running these models on real data and getting something out of them for real applications and so on. I wouldn't say like nobody had focused on it, but it hadn't been a big focus because, obviously you put most of the work on kind of getting there, and that's what was required for training. But then once so I think a lot of our work early on was just really doubling down on kind of very, very basic things, but are really core to the API experience, like fast inference, like really low latency. I think during the course of when we we started working on the API maybe on the order of like half a year before we did the public launch, and I think during the course of just a few months, I think we sped up. Like we reduced the latency by like something like 10x. We increased the throughput on these models by like hundreds of times, and so on, because like by default these models just weren't designed for that, and we had to do a lot of engineering work to make that happen. And I think that's something that's kind of is a little bit special for how we at OpenAI generally focus on these things. Like you would think like a lot of research is just like researchers thinking hard about things and like fiddling with algorithms and so on. And in reality, it's like in order to get these things to work, it's like a ton of engineering. And so we spent a ton of engineering to really kind of take these models, make sure that they use GPUs as efficiently as possible, cause them really, really low latency, and make it really scalable. Because the thing is, with these models, it's sort of like, I think our thesis here is like basically that these models will just get bigger and bigger, and so if you're a user of these models, like you don't want to deploy one of these models yourself. Like it's just it's just going to cost you too much because you need so many GPUs. If you just kind of play with a use case, it's not going to make economical sense for you to deploy this model by yourself. Instead, what makes economical sense is to share basically the model with lots of other developers, and that's essentially what's happening behind the scenes in our API. Is that thousands of developers are then using the same models, and that's the way you can kind of reach economies of scale, and that's like lowers then the prices for everybody to kind of access these models, and further kind of widens the distribution, so more people can actually try out these models and so on. And I think we think that's like really key to this. And so I think there was definitely a lot of challenges with that, and those challenges, I would say, are very much ongoing, because the models change in architecture, they change in size, they change in many different ways. Like the underlying hardware changes in many ways. So it's just like a ton of engineering going on all the time to kind of just push on these different axes that really matter for developers.
Great to know that. So, Peter, GPT-3 being one of the most popular models of all times, and the way it has empowered people, and the way it has reduced the time where people reduce the time in people realizing their ideas and putting them into execution. We have seen a lot of companies forming this on top of GPT-3. What are your thoughts on this growing ecosystem surrounding the API? And was there anything that took you by surprise in terms of GPT-3 use case when you saw it?
Yeah, I think there's definitely been a lot of things that we were surprised by. Like, I mean, even I don't remember when we started this, we didn't know exactly what the uptake would be. How, like, there was a big hypothesis even, like, is this going to be a useful technology? And so I think we all hoped that it was kind of ready, because like I think it wasn't clear, like there wasn't, if you look at GPT-2, there were many fewer use cases you could solve with GPT-2, and it wasn't clear to us initially if GPT-3 was kind of had crossed on threshold where it would actually be useful for a lot of different things. And I think that got validated really quickly, and I think that was like, I don't know if it was a surprise, but it was something we had hoped for, and it kind of turned out really well. But I think the surprises around it were things like, I think one big surprise for me was just to see that the meaning of a developer kind of changed with GPT-3. Like a developer, if you think about a developer, most people like imagine kind of a programmer sitting and programming, and that's like what people have in mind as a developer. What we saw on GPT-3 was like the profile of developer. Like a lot of the kind of people on our platform, they weren't programmers. Like they were authors, creatives of various kinds. They were like designers and product managers and so on. Like because suddenly to train the AI, you didn't have to kind of program. You just have to be really good at describing the task that you wanted the AI to do. When you wanted GPT-3 to do, you have to kind of create the right instructions. You had to kind of design the prompt in the right way. One of the people that got this really well is Andrew Main, who started working with us very early on GPT-3, and he, like, we had this kind of joke internally that he was like the GPT-3 prompt whisperer. Like he kind of was really good at figuring out how to get the right prompts to solve a whole swath of problems. And I think the fact that there was just some people that were better at this than others was like a pretty interesting surprise, and that oftentimes the people that were really good at it had no machine learning background. Sort of actually people with machine learning backgrounds and so on kind of had to unlearn how they thought about a lot of problems in order to kind of use GPT-3, and I thought that was like fairly surprising. We've since like adapted our models. You might have seen our Instruct series models where we kind of try to make it easier for people to tell GPT-3 what to do by just basically giving instructions instead. But I think early on that was definitely a big surprise. I think another thing and by the way, like one thing, some of those stories that I really like was there's a number of like developers that have told me that GPT-3 is what got them to learn how to program, because they got so excited that they came up with things like, here's like a cool application. Now I just want to create a business around this. So I need to learn how to code, and then they learn how to code so they can kind of do all the things around GPT-3 to create a great application. And I think that's just like super inspiring. And there's a number of applications out there that we built together with GPT-3 and like no code solutions like Bubble.io and so on. Which is just really cool. Like again, you see people that don't know how to program, but they can still build amazing things. And so that was a big surprise, how it kind of somehow lowered the barriers to create really amazing things. I think the other big surprise was like one of the use cases that I think people got really excited about quite early on was like coding, and that was, I think that was pretty surprising to us. That first of all, like how much coding GPT-3 could do. Like I don't think we had tested that super much, and people, it kind of just blew us away with having really cool demos where they there were somebody who tweeted a screencast where they created basically a button in the form of a watermelon just from writing it into GPT-3 and GPT-3 generating the code and so on. Like, I think that stuff is just like, that was super cool, and that led to us then like really seeing if we like doubling down on the coding use cases and seeing like, okay, can we make them out really amazing for coding, which resulted in Codex, which we released earlier this year. So I think there were like a definitely, so I would say like, the coding use case was really surprising to me. The fact that it lowered the barriers to even kind of create applications at all was a big kind of, I think, surprise to me. And also just like the breadth of applications has been just really fun to see generally. Like so many different things that people are applying GPT-3 to, which is like, I think makes sense if you think about it as like the first step of like more and more general purpose models.
Yeah, totally. Like I am amazed whenever I hear about each and every new use case of GPT-3. There's always something new going on, which is amazing which shows how general this technology already can be. I was wondering, do you have any favorite use case of your own?
Yeah, I think that one is really good. I feel like I don't want to single out like a particular one because but I think maybe the way I would think about it more is like, I think I sort of really get inspired by pretty much every use case I see, as long as like, a fairly kind of positive use case. But I think another thing I think about is I definitely have use cases I haven't seen so much yet, which I really want to see. Like, for example, I think I think there can be a huge potential for applying GPT-3 to kind of healthcare or like mental health and stuff like that, where obviously those are areas where you kind of need to be really careful because they're like very high stakes domains, but they can also have like these incredibly positive outcomes. Because if you think about it, what is exciting about more kind of general AI is that it can do more things, which basically lowers costs and increases access to things. So like, that means like, for healthcare, that means that, anybody can have access to like world-class doctors and stuff like that. Or, thinking about like mental health today, where it's like, very small piece of the population that can even afford to go and see mental health professionals like therapists or psychiatrists and so on, where it's possible that with this technology that can be much more scaled and basically giving many more people these kind of access to help when they need it. I think that's like an area where I'm just really excited about. There are some applications which I think are kind of more almost like meta applications, which I'm being pretty excited about, which is when people are using GPT-3 to build tools to accelerate research itself. It's sort of like if like a lot of researchers today are they're just more and more people doing research, and there's just more and more output from research, and it's really hard to consume all of that for humans, and so like seeing there are a number of applications on top of the API. I won't call them out by name, but are like focusing on these like trying to build the tools using GPT-3 to kind of search all the information, research-oriented information that's out there, publications, and so on, summarizing it, coming up with kind of coming up with research ideas and directions, and like helping people kind of really be creative in the research and so on. And I think that's just really exciting because that further accelerates, like, you know, if we can use that at OpenAI, we will get better at our work to kind of create these models, and it kind of accelerates everything. So that's also an area I'm super excited about.
Wow, these are some really interesting and exciting areas to look forward. So, Peter, the time since you have released an API, it's been quite a time, and it's been quite a journey since you have released the API. What do you think were your biggest learning from the process, and what is your go-to advice for the new user or the incoming API users who wants to start their journey with GPT-3?
Yeah, I would say like it depends a little bit on the persona, but like, you know, if it's a person that has done some machine learning and so on, like oftentimes what I try to tell them is that like just start by like forgetting the things that you know, and like just go to the playground and try to get GPT-3 to do what you want it to do by just like asking it. Like usually these days I kind of orient people to go to the instruct series models, and basically just like imagine GPT-3 is like a friend or a colleague, and you're asking them to do something. How would you describe the task that you want them to do? And then, you know, see what GPT-3 responds, and if it doesn't respond in the way that you want, then, you know, iterate on your instructions, and then basically get to a point where you feel like, you know, maybe 20 to 50% of the time you get something that's pretty good out of GPT-3. Because if you can get to that point, then there's like really no limits in some sense, because this is something that is kind of I think a lot of people struggle with this early on with GPT-3, is that you know, you would get GPT-3 to do something like maybe 30% of the time, you would go like, oh wow, I can't imagine that GPT-3 did that, and then 70% of the time you would be like, that wasn't quite right, you know, so some applications were really clever about how they got around this. Like, you know, a lot of the copy writing applications, they show you like 10 different suggestions, and so it's okay that, like, you know, half of them are not so good, as long as you can find like one or two really good ones out of there. It's a little bit like a search engine, right? Like where like not all the results are what you're looking for, as long as you can kind of look through and pick the one that you're really going for. But like getting to that point where at least you're getting a few good examples, that is really key, because if you get to that point, then all you need then to kind of start improving your results is kind of more examples and more data, and that's where you can like use fine tuning to kind of push it almost to arbitrary kind of performance. So that's really the advice I try to give people, is like go to the playground, iterate on the instructions until you get something that's pretty good, that you like at least a few times, you know, 3 times out of 10, it gives you something that you're really happy with, and then try to figure out how you can plug it into your application to get more data, and then use fine tuning to keep on pushing up the performance. That's sort of the way I try to tell people how to use the API.
Awesome. So as you mentioned, the API attracted people with various backgrounds. Many of them are very curious, creative individuals that like to play with things and experiment and share these experiments out there. And I think within like less than a year, you really could see that this whole amazing community like blossomed around the API, and people started to share their experiences about it. And I was wondering whether you guys had something like that in mind, or whether it happened kind of organically, and to just help channel that with like a community forum, for example.
I think, yeah, honestly, I think a lot of that happened quite organically. Like our focus was almost more on just ensuring that the API would kind of be scalable and easy to use. Like all the things that in some way, the things that we cared most about is that it's just really useful for developers and like easy to prototype with and so on. And if you think about like what really matters for that are things are like fairly basic. It's like, first of all, the models need to be really good. So we kind of had that down, and we're doing more and more work to kind of just keep on making them good. Things like, it needs to be fairly, it needs to be kind of priced in a way where it's accessible to people. So, that's why we focused on kind of making sure that we had some free trial that people could try with it, but also making sure that, the prices were kind of reasonable so people could build applications on it. Things like really low latency, so that it's easy to iterate. Like you don't want to put something in and then like wait for minutes to get the response back, which was like the case just as in the very early days of the API. And now it's like really kind of, you can kind of see the model output stuff in real time, right? So we really put a lot of our focus on that, and it was like really just fun for us to see the community kind of be created. Like we put some scaffolding in place. Like we had a developer Slack initially, which was really fun to kind of, where people kind of could really trade ideas. And then at some point that became sort of a little bit unwieldy because there were so many people. So that's when we switched to the community forum. And also because a lot of people said that they couldn't find a lot of the things because it just disappeared into the black hole of Slack history. So that's also why we switched to the community forum, to have a little bit more of a permanent place for things. And so we put that scaffolding in place, but I don't think we definitely want to kind of do more to kind of just engage even more into our community. But I've just been really happy how great the community has been almost by itself. Like there's so many creative people teaching each other things and so on. And since we're OpenAI is still fairly small. Like the group of people when we launched the API, there were basically 5 people at OpenAI working on the API. So it was like really, really small effort. So we just didn't have the bandwidth to do a lot of things. Instead, like we put all that bandwidth just on the kind of really core things. And obviously, as we grow, we will put more and more effort on really nurturing our community even more. But for me, it's just been great to see how much that has happened just by itself, by just it being full of like creative and just kind individuals that are teaching each other things. And seeing like lots of like there's tons of like companies that have kind of been created out of this community, people meeting each other and creating companies together, or like pairing up to do really amazing art together and so on. It's just like incredibly inspiring to see.
Yeah, totally. And along with this flourishing community around the API, we now have, I guess, a number of startups and corporates whose products are powered by GPT-3. So coming to that,
that's right. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah, no, just go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just got a bit excited.
Not a problem. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I think that's a really great point. I think that one that was probably also a big surprise. The fact that I think within a few months of us launching the API, there were like a number of companies that were built entirely on top of the OpenAI API, which are like now have many of them have raised VC funding at fairly high valuations and stuff like that. And that was just like crazy to me that that happened so quickly. And also just in some way, I think just a good sign of where this will go. This is like, because this is right now they're like they're just in a few areas, and there's just so much more opportunity for people to build companies on. So I'm just excited of all the different areas people will do the same in.
Yep, totally. We have seen exponential growth in the startups who are just built on top of GPT-3, and it's not even less than a year they started raising Series A, Series B funding, which is an amazing thing to see, and it has never happened before. So it is revolutionary, to put it in words. But I guess there has been a very bigger part of you guys being a supportive hand and providing all kind of supports and taking in feedback from the startups and early adopters, which resulted into this great ecosystem and the wonderful things that we see. So in in your views, Peter, how actively have you collaborated, or do you collaborate in current capacity with the startups or corporates frequently using the GPT-3 API?
Yeah, this was like a core principles from the very beginning, like even before we launched publicly. It's like we just work super closely with our customers. Like we kind of love customer feedback, and we've always tried to kind of lower the kind of to make the kind of the communications channels between our customers and like the folks within OpenAI that are developing the API as kind of as high bandwidth as possible, to the extent where we have a number of things, like kind of things we do to enable this. Like, for example, like with pretty much for the first probably 100 customers or so, like we kind of set up individual Slack channels directly with those customers, where everybody on the OpenAI API team were in those channels, like researchers, product managers, engineers, like really everyone were there, and like just hearing and talking directly to customers. So like whenever there was an issue, we could just go and fix the issue immediately. Like the engineer would hear about the issue directly from the customer and go and fix it. And so like that is just that means that you can just move much faster. Like like there's less, like I'm like the team we have at OpenAI, I'm just like extremely honored to be working with them. They're like some of the smartest people I've ever worked with, and you don't need necessarily a lot of kind of management around that. You just need to make sure that they hear what customers want, and then they'll make all the great decisions along the way. And I think so we set up that a lot so that everybody on our team could hear things directly from our customers. And obviously, as we've gotten like to thousands of customers and so on, that's a little bit harder to scale. But it's still the case where whenever like we have kind of new product features and so on coming online, we try to find customers that we know would find those features useful, and we kind of create direct communication channels with those customers where we give them early access to features like fine-tuning and so on. Like we worked with a number of customers on fine-tuning before it got published more broadly in the API. Similar for a lot of kind of search experiments that functionality experiments and so on that we've done. We worked very closely with customers to really iterate on that, and because that's like that's how we think you kind of just build a good product, is by just hearing the feedback early and like directly, and kind of feeling the pain that the customer has, so that we can kind of quickly address it and get to a product quickly. So this is just something we care super deeply about, and it's like core to how we work.
That's a great way of approaching collaboration with your customers, and especially at the early stage where you want to understand them as much as possible and their needs as well. So hats off to you for that. Thank you for being so open. I'm curious if looking a little bit ahead, if there are any like specific issues or problems you want to solve. I know that one of the latest releases of yours was the fine-tuning. So it has its history probably in terms of how you wanted to optimize the API and the user experience. Are there more things like that, in the horizon, in the nearest horizon for you?
Yeah, so I think our focus remains fairly consistent in that the things that we really care about is continuing to make our models kind of better. That means more capable and faster, so that means kind of we will keep on pushing on areas where we see there can be a lot of value, like the fact that, for example, coding and codecs and so on, like we will keep on like pushing our models towards being better at more and more things. And then we have a lot of we put in a lot of work to kind of make them much faster and like more cost effective and so on. It's also things that we like care really kind of deeply about, and we will kind of double down on. And then I think another area which we are quite excited about, like one of the big reasons why we launched the API in private beta was because we believe that there's like enormous kind of positive outcomes and use cases, but we also know that like AI can, this, like we have general AI, it can be kind of, there's always a potential for misuse. And we really wanted to kind of see how people actually used these models, and also kind of understand kind of what challenges our customers would face by deploying these models, and see kind of what abuse they would see or misuse they would see from end users and so on. So we've learned quite a lot over the past year in kind of what is what the challenges are there and what our customers need there. So I'm quite excited about like a lot of safety tooling that we will be rolling out over the coming year to kind of just make it easier and easier to kind of deploy our models safely for more and more use cases. Because right now we're also being a little bit careful about the different use cases that we permit on the platform, because like we want to be careful that we have the right kind of tooling in place to kind of enable those safely. It's not like we will we actually want to just allow more and more things on the API, as long as we kind of can provide the tooling around it to be safe. And that's going to be a big focus for us as well. I think there's also stuff around just keep on pushing on making the API simpler and simpler to use. I think fine-tuning is a way to kind of really push the capability of our model for specific use cases. But I think fine-tuning is still one of those areas which feels like a little bit too researchy for me. I would like to kind of make it even easier to use for most developers. Like you shouldn't have to know about things like learning rates or things like kind of they're like kind of all these settings like weight decays and so on. Like, I don't think like really where we want to get to it, where it's super simple to fine tune a model where you just provide more examples of what you want the model to do and it gets better at doing it. But if you think about that just means that in some way that just means doing more of all the things we're already doing, better models, more safety tools, easier to use API. That is like what we really, really care about. And I don't think we will necessarily build lots of other things around that in the near term. It's all about like getting those core things really, really good.
That sounds amazing. That sounds really amazing. And we always appreciated OpenAI's push towards making things simpler and easier for people to do. And you guys have created this trend of delivering model as a service, and which has been seen as a first step towards the democratization of AI and making it more accessible and easier for people to use, as well as enabling and lots of people from different backgrounds to come and build something great, build an application that wasn't even been possible before, and that too without the prerequisite and the background that was needed before. What are your views on that, and how do you think you're going to continue that going forward?
Yeah, I think it's really I think it's really great that there are like just more and more that it just gets easier and easier to kind of create things to build on these models and so on, because like I think that's just a general kind of software trend in some way, like where it's just like this has been going on for like decades in some way. If you think about it, it's before it used to be the case where if you needed to kind of launch a website, you had to build a physical server and connect it to the internet and like sysadmin it yourself and so on. And now you can like deploy applications where they just run distributedly without you caring about any of the underlying hardware and so on and in the cloud. And so in some ways, I feel like it's almost like a natural kind of continuation of that. I think the things that I'm particularly excited about, and when it comes to like AI here, is that I think as these models get more and more capable, I do think it's really important that they that there is like a lot of sort of that kind of we take safety really seriously, and I think like that's like one big piece of our strategy is that we really want this technology to be used as many as possible, and it's like really core to our mission to make sure that like the barriers to getting to use this technology is really low. That's why we built this API and so on. But we also think that the way to make these models better safety-wise is by seeing all the ways where they don't behave well, and in some way, by having lots of people use these models, we can kind of see all the different ways the models, where you get stuff out of the models that you frankly don't want out of the models, but that we can feed that into our research and our training runs to kind of get these models better and better and better, and like safer and safer and safer. So it's like an iterative scheme here that I think is really important, and I think this is something I'm hoping like a lot of these other services that are being built will also do, and I think we can see that with a lot of the other kind of model API services that are being created. I feel fairly good about like that, like most of them take also safety really seriously, and I would like to think that we had some part in that, in like setting some of the standards for that, and I think that's what we want to kind of continue doing, is like we want to we want to make sure that we can help kind of work with these other players to kind of set really good safety standards and so on going forward, and then together we can all kind of just make it easy to build all kinds of amazing things. I feel like the coming decade is going to be so exciting in terms of just all the things that people will build on top of this technology, and I think it's like I think by working together we can kind of really create some really good guardrails and stuff like that to ensure that like these technologies, these applications that are going to be built are going to be really, really positive for society and just really fun, frankly.
Yep. OpenAI is truly making AGI possible and safer at the same time. Like thinking about AGI being accessible, or thinking about something like GPT-3 few years back was a far-fetched idea. And I am sure, Peter, like there will be a lot of people who will be coming to you and asking, like, who don't have that kind of technical background, or who come from some different background. What is GPT-3? What does it mean? And you then just need to have that one sentence layman explanation using some analogy or something, like what does GPT-3 mean to you? Like as the authors of this book, if people come to us, and many people come to us and ask who doesn't know about GPT-3 and ask us like what GPT-3 means to you. So our one sentence explanation is like GPT-3 is something that reduces friction between ideas and execution. What is your that one line explanation or one sentence explanation to that?
It's a hard one. I think it's I'd struggle with this one because it's such a general technology. Yeah, I think it's really kind of, maybe the way to put it is it's really like it is sort of like an accelerator of both kind of mundane tasks as well as like creative tasks. In that, for mundane tasks, you can kind of tell GPT-3 to do them, and they can, and it can do it fairly well. But you can also just use GPT-3 as like almost like some sort of partner, like kind of brainstorming partner, right? Like, and in some way, that's one of the most inspiring kind of ways I see people use it. Like, I think it's, there's a surprisingly high number of our users that kind of use GPT-3, the playground, day to day for all kinds of things, like getting advice, like, helping kind of draft emails and so on, where it's just like almost like some kind of partner to do kind of day-to-day tasks where otherwise they might have a friend which they brainstorm and ask these advice, and it's much faster if they do it with GPT-3, and they kind of they sample a few times and they get something that's fairly good. And I think so I think it's sort of like, it's just something that can make you do kind of boring stuff faster, but and do fun stuff in some way more productively. So that's maybe one way I would pitch it sometimes.
That is great. That is great. It eliminates the boring stuff from your life and makes fun things more funnier.
Right.
Great, Peter. I guess we are approaching towards the end of our interview. And thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for taking out time to talk to us. Yeah, and we really appreciate this.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And if you have any follow-ups, feel free to just post them. I'm very excited to see how this book will shape up. And yeah, thank you so much for just doing this work. It's really exciting.
Awesome. We also are excited about how it will come out eventually. Yeah, again, thank you for sitting down with us. It was great to talk to you.
Absolutely, my pleasure.